Okay, so you should have already done the numeracy lesson first, and now we are on the actual main lesson. So we're going to have kind of lesson that I do, practice for you, lesson that I do, and then practice for you. Okay, so it's building off of everything we've already done. Just the other day, we did finding term zero. So here, for example, remember we did the days starting at 1, for example, and then we had to figure out, okay, let's create an equation where it's the day 0, where we haven't spent anything yet. So in this case, that's called initial value. It's your very first starting value before anything has changed. Okay, and your x value is typically 0. So it says, state the initial value of each of the following. So here, before any hours were worked, I earned $25. So that's my initial value. So my initial value, which I can do IV for short, $25. Okay. Here, my initial value happens when x is 0. It's always going to be xy in a table. X and then y. So when x is 0, that's your initial value. So here you're going to say IV equals 12 centimeters because you have to use your units. Okay, so that's all. It's just stating the initial value when x is 0. Your initial value is the starting value or term 0 in the pattern. So term 0 happens when x is 0. Your term number is always your x. Now it says calculate the initial value for each of the following. Okay, so notice here this time we start at 1. So if you say it's a car, days you've rented it on the first day, it already costs $266. Okay, so let's see first what the first differences are here. So from 266 to 402, I've added 136. Each time I've added 136. Okay. From 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, I've added 1. Okay? Now I have to figure out term 0, my starting value, term 0. Okay? I have to work backwards. If I know I've added 136 each time, then my term 0 should be 136 less than this, so that when I move down, I'm at 266. So now, since I'm working backwards, I'm going to go minus 136, minus 1. Okay, and you'll get 130. So then we would say, okay, well, my initial value is 266 minus 136. My initial value will be $130. Okay. Now here, we're going to do the same thing. We first calculate, okay, what are our first differences? Let's see. Each time here, I take away 10. Each time here, I go up by 1. And I really want to make sure you guys are doing your arrows so that they're not attached. I can see the arrow. Okay, it should be nice and neat and in a line. Okay, now I need to find term 0. Here's the thing. For this one, term 0 was just the term before 1. For this one, term 0 is not right before term 4. Term 0 is 4 more higher. So I need to deduct 10 4 more times before I get here, which means I need to add 10 if I'm working backwards 4 more times to get to 400. So here is what we can do. We can say, okay, the initial value is going to be 400, right here, 400, plus 10 4 more times. So plus 10 4 more times. My initial value is going to be 400 plus 40. Initial value is going to be 440, which makes sense because if I start at 0 and I'm at 440, The next one for term 1 will be 430. For term 2, it'll be 420. For term 3, it'll be 410. And for term 4, it'll be 400. Okay? So it's important to look at, okay, what does that term start? You can't just jump and say, okay, term 0 is 410 because it's 10 more than 400. Okay, now we're using yesterday's lesson, so rate of change, to calculate the initial value. So here we have, notice that these don't go up by ones. They go up by the same amount, so it is linear, but they don't go up by ones. And it starts at 10, and we want to find initial value. So let's see. So let's calculate our first differences. So here, each time I add 136 again. Okay, and here I add 2 each time. I need to find out what is my initial value. So what is term 0? Okay, well first let's figure out what the rate of change is per 1. Okay, so I know how much it changes per 2 days rented. It changes by 136 every 2 days. I want to figure out for every 1 day how much does it change, and that is called rate of change. It's the rate at which we change per individual day. So we're gonna put rate of change, ROC for short, and it's the change, that's what that triangle means, change in Y over the change in X. The change is just here. So we've already calculated the change. The first difference is the change in Y is 136, and our change in our X's is 2. So for every 2 days we spend we get charged 136 more. It actually ends up being $68 per day. So we figured out the rate of change. Okay, per day. So here it was per day technically because all my X's went up by 1. So then I multiplied my rate of change and multiplied what I'm changing by the number of times I need to get to 0. So from 4 to 0, 4 more times I need to deduct that difference. Here, I've now figured out, okay, by each individual day, I'm going up by 68, which means my initial value is going to be my 810. And because I add each time, I'm going to subtract now, and I'm going to get minus my rate, so 68. And I need to go up 10 more times. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 10 because I need to subtract 68 10 more times before I can get to the top. I'm going to get initial value equals 810 minus 680. Initial value equals $130. Okay, so we're going to get at 0, we have $130. Now for the next one, the last one here, exact same thing, but different numbers. So we're going to go, okay, what are my first differences? So from 410 to 366, I take away 44 each time. But now my X's, they do go up by the same amount. I'm adding 2 each time, but I want to know, okay, per each individual increase, so if it were 6, for example, what would my number be? What would my Y be? So I need to jump up here and figure out, okay, what is term 0? What is term 0? Okay, so I need to figure out my rate of change. My rate of change equals my change in Y over my change in X. And then I have that this equals, okay, negative 44 is my change in Y, positive 2 is my change in X. So each individual day I change by negative 22 is what I take away. Now I need to take away 22 5 times to get to my 5th term. So I need to do the opposite because since I subtract each term and I'm moving backwards up, I need to add. So I'm going to go, okay, initial value equals this amount here, 410, plus 22, and then I need to do that 5 times to get to 0. So I'm going to get 410 plus 110, initial value equals 520. 520. Okay, so that's how you find initial value. The back is practice for you. This is homework, and I will be checking tomorrow. Okay, and then I have time limits for these videos, so I'm actually going to do equation of a linear relation in the next video.